everybody, this is Robin from Zapper Pest Control. I've got a bit of a long drive, so we're going to do another ride-along video. This time I'm heading down towards a town, sort of a town, called Cheshire. It's outside of Eugene, near Lane County, or in Lane County. And I'm heading down from Albany. Had a bit of a brief stop. I got, a few minutes to kill, so I pulled off here. And I thought I would quickly give you a little bit of discussion about moles and their tunnels. We've had people ask in the past, we have a lot of customers that ask this very specific question: why do moles tunnel and why do they make mounds in my yard? What's the purpose of that? And so I thought I would shed a little bit of light on that. So when a mole tunnels, well, first off, okay, moles and gophers are two very different things. They're not even closely related, but they will make, equally large mounds in your yard, and they both dig the exact same way, but for slightly different reasons. Gophers, the mounds will be slightly horseshoe shaped. Think of like the letter C kind of, on its side, so the opening is downwards, and there'll be a small plug kind of off center near the base of that. And the plug is usually pretty visible. The mounds tend to be a little flatter, they're not as tall, whereas moles, you get that, kind of standard volcano-shaped mound, and the plug will be right in the middle, but you usually can't see the plug very well with moles. So that's one basic difference. The other main one would be that gophers are rodents. They're sciriomorph rodents. They've got large cheek pouches they can store things in. They're pretty closely related to, nutria, beavers, not so much rats, but they are related to those rodents. Whereas a mole is nowhere near related to rodents. They look a little bit like gophers from the sides or the back, similar tails, they dig similar ways, same kind of paw structure mostly. But moles are insectivores, and rather than rodents, they are far more closely related to shrews. A good example would be hedgehogs and anteaters even. They're way more closely related to anteaters than they are, gophers. They just happen to be convergent in the sense that they and gophers both have the same way of doing how they do. So when a mole digs a tunnel in your yard, it's not simply because he's trying to build a house down there and that's where he lives. That tunnel is actually kind of, it's a food catching trap. It's really just a big lure and trap. Think of it like a fishing net that he spreads out. And the more mounds you see, the farther spread his fishing net is. And the idea is he will fastidiously travel through those tunnels, cleaning them over and over and over again. Well, if you think about that, that dirt's got to go somewhere. You can't really dig a big tunnel underground without taking the dirt out. That's where the mounds come in. So what they'll do is they'll, have their tunnel, they're digging in a straight line, we'll say, and then he'll branch off at some point, move a little bit, go up, and deposit all that dirt. So when you see a mound, his main tunnel isn't actually under that mound. It'll be about a foot away, or even 6 inches away, but it'll be off center from that a little bit. That kind of clears up a little bit about where his actual tunnels are that he travels versus which are just little off-ramps that he makes. Now, as to the main tunnel himself, he'll clean this thing constantly, and they have no real season. They'll function year-round. But in the winter, the ground gets cold, it's harder to dig through, it gets dangerous because there can be flooding. They don't like that, so they try to relax a bit in the winter. So what they do is they build up a food store, and that's where this tunnel comes into play. It's kind of genius. So they're very sensitive to pressure differential. So they can tell when something falls into that tunnel. They're very attuned to it, they know it very well. So they cast a very large tunnel, with series of offshoots and things like that. Sometimes it'll spiral around. It's basically just a big fishing net, and they're waiting for worms, as they're naturally just tunneling through the ground, to fall into the tunnel, like a net. The minute the worm falls into the tunnel, the mole knows it, it can tell, it can smell it, it can sense the vibrations of it, the pressure, and it'll immediately rush down to that part of the tunnel, bite that worm, and then drag it back to a larder storage that it keeps, oftentimes up to 6 feet down. Those are very difficult to find. In the field, it's really rare you'll find something like that, because most pest control guys are not going to be digging 6 feet down in your lawn. That would be destructive and difficult. So usually those are never found. But he'll keep those worms down there, and then when it gets cold in the winter, he'll eat them. If he runs out of food, then yes, even in the snow, you'll start seeing mounds coming up in your yard while he's just trying to cast a net. But not a lot of worms are around, so things get a little desperate. They're also prone to drowning. When you get heavy rains, those tunnels start to fill up. They don't like that, so they try to seal it all off and make fewer and fewer mounds towards winter. But they'll still be around, and they still can function. They don't have a hibernation or anything. So now, an interesting thing about catching these worms, moles' saliva has a paralytic agent in it that's especially effective on earthworms and night crawlers and things like that. So a worm falls in a tunnel, he runs over there, bites it, which paralyzes it, but doesn't kill it. He drags that down to his larder storage, and it'll stay down there alive for months. So he's always got a live meal. He doesn't like to eat dead worms if he can avoid it. And that's basically how a mole digs his tunnels, why he makes the mounds where he makes them, and what they're for beyond just shelter. It is his house, he is designing this network of tunnels that he's going to live in, And if it's good enough and there's a lot of food, he'll be sated with that. He won't bother trying to branch out to other areas until mating season comes around. So he's just basically using these tunnels as just a way to catch the worms in your lawn. If there's not a lot of worms, he won't tunnel as much there. He'll go to areas that do have a lot of worms. For instance, the nicest lawns with the nicest watering, those are going to be real tasty for him. That's why, country clubs are, constantly battling moles and gophers. That's good land for moles and gophers to find food in. It's real plentiful. And so you can end up with problems there. The nicer the lawn, the more tastier a buffet that's going to be for Mr. Mole. So when mating time comes around, the female will emit a chirping sound, and it will attract males that are nearby. They can pick up that resonance, and they'll make her way to her. There's a little bit of this and that where they try to figure out whether they're going to be compatible or not. She might kill him. But if they mate, they'll do that. She'll end up having offspring, just a few, at maximum. And those will take a few months to really become the size where they can begin tunneling and doing their own thing. At that point, you go from having, 2 or 3 mounds a week that a fairly industrious mole is making. It can even be up to 10. That'll triple once those young are reared and begin, tunneling out and foraging on their own. However, the male at this point cannot be around or he'll try to kill them. So they're very aggressive. And so you usually don't get a lot of moles on one property unless it's a big property with lots of room. Because if those moles encounter each other's tunnels, there's a good chance they'll end up fighting it out to the death. Gophers are even more aggressive. Gophers will actively kill moles in a fight pretty quickly. So you usually don't see both of those right next to each other, but it is possible to have them on the same property. It's just a run-in waiting to happen. But that's basically what there is to know about moles from a consumer standpoint. We've tried a variety of things. Those sound devices you can order don't typically work very well. I wouldn't advocate for those. In fact, I've actually seen moles tunnel into a yard, go to one of those sound chirping generators, and just push it out of the ground. So that's, rejected. So I wouldn't say those are very useful. Trapping them works very well. We have a variety of things we do at our company to trap for moles. Unlike gophers, you can't really bait for moles because it's difficult to come up with a bait that simulates larvae or worms, other than using real worms, and they'll just crawl away. So, I'm sure there's some work you could do there, but baiting for moles is not really something that's common or plausible. Whereas for gophers, it's very easy because they'll eat vegetable matter, they'll eat fruits, they'll eat grains, and so you can have a pesticide-laced grain that can be placed there, provided you have the right licensing to do so. And so they're a little easier to handle with baits and things. But with a mole, you're pretty much stuck with trapping. Unlike gophers, they're far more prone to drowning. We've had many jobs where we get a couple of hard rains and you never see Mr. Mole again. He's just gone. It's also possible they'll die of old age down there. They don't live very long, just a year or so. Around 2 or 3 up to max. And so that's basically what you need to know about moles. I thought I'd just shed a little bit of light on that and tell you a little bit about what I know, what you can know, and just what's going on under your lawn. There's a whole world down there, and it's actually pretty fascinating when you look at those details.